So yesterday we did those constructions, constructing a tangent line. Any questions on that construction? Basically the same construction as perpendicular bisector of a line segment, just that first initial step. Okay, moving on then. So today we're going to talk about the equation of a circle. So remember, like the equation of a circle is just an equation that any point, or the equation of any graphed figure is just an equation that any point that's on that figure works in that equation. Like for example, if I have the equation y equals 2x plus 5, it's a line, right? And that means that any point that's on that line works in this equation, right? Or if I have the equation like a parabola, x squared plus 2x minus 1. You know that this is the graph of a parabola because it's a quadratic equation. I mean, it's the same idea. If you were to graph that parabola, it means that every point that's on that parabola, if you think of it as a coordinate, an x coordinate and a y coordinate, work if you substitute that x and that y into the equation. That's what it means to find the equation of a figure, any type of graphed curve or line or anything like that. So the same thing goes for the equation of a circle. We just want to find an equation that any point that's on the circle actually works in that equation. So I'm going to give you the equation. We're going to do a couple examples, and then I'll talk about why the equation is what it is. So here's the equation. For a circle with center AB. So A and B could be any numbers, and radius R. Again, R could be any positive number, right? Radius has to be like a positive thing. For any circle with center AB and radius R, equation is x minus a squared plus y minus b squared equals r squared. That's the equation. Okay, so there's two ways that you could have problems that deal with this. One type of problem would be if they give you either a description of a circle or a graph of a circle, and they want you to find its equation. That's one type of problem. Okay, so like for example, they might give you something like, suppose the center of the circle is at the point 2, 5, and the radius of the circle is 4. So basically, I just take these numbers and I just replace in this formula. The 2 is going to replace the A, the 5 is going to replace B, and the 4 is going to replace R. So if I replace all that stuff into this equation, I end up with x minus 2 squared plus y minus 5 squared equals 4 squared, 16. That's the equation of the circle that fits that description. Okay, sometimes they'll mix it up by, instead of giving you the radius, maybe they'll give you the diameter or something like that, but that's no more difficult, right? Like if they said the center is, suppose it was like -1, 0, and the diameter is, let's say the diameter was like 6 radical 2, or something weird like that, not an integer. Okay, the first thing I would do is just cut this in half to get the radius. So half of 6 radical 2 would be 3 radical 2. So then if you just substitute that information into the equation, it ends up being x, now it's x minus this x coordinate, which would, in this case, would be x plus 1, right? Because you're subtracting -1 squared, plus, what's the next thing in the equation going to be? If this y coordinate is 0, what's... Yeah, but you don't even need to write that. It's just going to be y squared. Yeah, it's like y minus 0 squared, but you don't need to write the y minus 0 part. You can just write y squared equals, and then this is going to be 3 radical 2 squared, but if I wanted to simplify that, remember you have to square the 3 and square radical 2. So you get 9 times 2, right? The square of 3 is 9, the square of radical 2 is 2. So this ends up being 18. So you're going to get x plus 1 squared plus y squared equals 18. Okay, this is called standard form of the equation of a circle. Okay? Or they might give you a graph. Like for example, they might say, here's a circle. I'm just going to sketch it with the graph paper. Here's a circle. Suppose its center is at the point -1, 2. And let's suppose the circle is tangent to the x-axis. Right? This circle is tangent to the x-axis. So what's its radius? I know the center is the point -1, 2. What's the radius? 2. Yeah, it's 2, right? If it's tangent to the x-axis, that means the distance from the center to the edge of the circle is 2. And if it's 2 here, that means it's 2 all the way around. That's the definition of the circle, right? So the radius is 2. So this would just be x plus 1 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 4 squared. So the things you have to be really aware of, and the things that are most common mistakes would be, remember when you substitute these numbers into the equation, there's a sign change involved. If this is -1, this ends up being +1. This is +2, this ends up being -2. So that's the most common mistake. People forget to do that sign change. And then the second thing is, this has to be the square of the radius, not the radius itself. Okay, this is r squared. So that's the second most common mistake. Okay? The second type of problem then is, instead of giving you the description of the circle or a picture of the circle, they might just give you and ask you to find the equation. They might give you the equation and ask you to describe the circle or to graph the circle. Okay, it's the same thing. It's just going the opposite direction. So, like for example, if they gave you something like x plus 7 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 25. And they said, find the center and radius of this circle. You could just pick it right out of the equation. The center is going to be like these numbers with a sign change, right? Because to go the other way, there has to be a sign change. So to go this way, you have to use the sign change as well. So it's going to be -7, +3. Does everybody understand why there's a sign change? Because the formula says x minus a, y minus b, right? What's the radius in this case? 5, because this is r squared. So it's going to be the square root of 25, which is 5. They could have very easily asked us to graph this. It wouldn't have been very difficult at all. Once you've identified the center and radius, you can graph a circle easily, right? What if we have something like x squared plus y plus 4 squared equals 8. What's the center? Yeah, 0, -4. Everybody cool with that? What's the radius? Square root of 8, yeah. And they might say, express the radius in simplest radical form if it's not a whole number. So then you have to remember simplest radical form. Remember, you need to find the biggest perfect square that divides evenly into 8. So which perfect square divides evenly into 8? 4 does. So this would be like 4 times 2. So this is square root of 4 times the square root of 2, which is 2 radical 2. That's the radius in simplest radical form. Okay, so 2 things you need to be able to do. If they give you a description of a circle or a graph of a circle, you have to be able to write its equation. And if they give you the equation of a circle in standard form like this, you need to be able to find the center and radius or graph it. Okay? Any questions on that? Now let's talk about why the formula is what it is, and you'll see it makes perfect sense. So let's just do an example. Like suppose you have a situation where, let's just randomly draw a circle. And let's say that the center of the circle happens to be at like 1, 3. I'm just making this problem up. Suppose the center of the circle is at like 1, 3. And let's suppose that the radius of the circle is 2. So let's say this distance right here is 2. And let's say this is just a random point that's on the circle. I could have labeled it anywhere, and its coordinates are x, y. Well, if you just think about the definition of a circle, the definition of a circle is all the points in the xy plane that are, like for this circle, it's all the points that are 2 units away from the point 1, 3. Every point that fits that description is on that circle, right? So essentially, I could use the distance formula here. Remember, the distance formula is this is from like the first week of school. The distance formula is the square root of x1 minus x2 squared plus y1 minus y2 squared. Do you remember that? It's the square root of the difference of the x value squared plus the difference of the y value squared. If I just apply this formula to this situation, this is like x1, this is x2, and then y1 and y2, you get the distance, which is 2, is the square root of x minus 1 squared plus y minus 3 squared. And then just simply squaring both sides gives you the equation of the circle. If I square both sides, I get x minus 1 squared. I'm just switching them now. I'm putting this stuff on the left just so it looks like what I expect it to look like. Plus y minus 3 squared equals 4. And that's exactly what we think the formula should look like. So really, the circle formula is really just the distance formula where you square both sides. That's really the bottom line. Okay? So things to remember about the distance formula. You have to remember to change the sign of the x and y coordinates of the center. And you need to remember to square the radius. If you're going the other way, you need to remember to change the sign of the x and y coordinates, and you need to remember to square root that number that's on the right-hand side. Does everybody understand? Okay, so that's it. The homework is on Delta Math. It's just called the equation of a circle.